And away we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be in the world today. This is Coffee Talk, or at Coffee Talk Live on YouTube, or Prepper University on YouTube, or at Coffee Talk Chat on X, formerly known as Twitter, as well as Fistful of Radio. That is fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and Friday at noon. Friday at noon, as we get ready to dive into what is going on in the world today, taking a look at the news and picking it apart and showing some things you may know about and some things you may not. You never know. And of course, on the live portion, which is on YouTube and Twitter, but I don't know if I can see the comments from Twitter, actually. I don't know if they come up here. But I do read as many of the comments as I can reasonably for those of you who are listening and not able to see what's going on so that you can keep up. And I'll go ahead and I'll acknowledge some of the people who have chimed in here to let me know that they are viewing in the live portion on YouTube. I see Delo is here, Helter is here, Dragon Semper Fi is here, Boogers is here, Preparedness Veteran, Urban Angst, he says he's back in British Columbia. Very good. Hope things are going well there. As we well know, the Western world is trying to turn socialist, and Canada is no exception. And it's a mess. It's very messy, actually. Got Dusty sitting in the background. For those of you who can see, there she is in the chair in Daniel's spot. And Uncle is on the floor back here somewhere. I saw him. I see Lottie Mystique. Is it Lottie or Lady? It looks like Lottie Mystique. Says tuning in from New York City. And Cruising is here. Just got in from a work meeting. Oh, so you wasted your time. I have never been to any meeting at work that was worth the trouble. Worth the trouble. It's just something they do. Just something they do. Someone whose job it is to polish a seat with their butt thinks it's helpful somehow. We'll have a meeting and waste your time. I don't know. Maybe your meeting went well. Who knows? It's a justification of job. Anyways, as we dive into the news, and of course, you know, the biggest stories that are going on right now are the stories in Israel, because the Ukraine, where's that? Who's the Ukraine? What's that? Forgot all about it. Forgot all about it because Israel is the big news now. And I can't blame it for being the big news, because what happens there will affect the entire world, because the entire world is infested with people from that region of the world who have entered Western countries illegally and are sitting there, and God knows who they are or what they're doing. But that's not the first story we're going to read. I'm going to give you a break on that today. Monkey is here. Urban says most meetings are really just struggle sessions, the struggle to stay awake. Yeah. Or it's a bitch fest. And Uncle left the room. And somebody wants to blame someone else and make people feel guilty for something that isn't their fault or not their problem. It's because of you, and this and that, and blah. Okay. But we're going to start off with everyone's favorite poster child, Greta Thunberg. And this is a story that comes from Reuters. And I just wanted to make a couple of points about this. Yeah, I know this is not the top news story of the day, but this kind of cracks me up. It says climate activist Greta Thunberg detained by police in London. And I don't know how, for those of you who can see, take a good look at this image. Doesn't she look like Honey Boo Boo right there? You know, that famous image of Honey Boo Boo running that's used in a lot of memes? That's what that looks like to me. Somebody ought to Photoshop her out of that picture and have her like running from a bear or something, running away from a Sharknado. She looks terrible right here. And oh, look at that. 1, 2, 3 chins. How did that happen? She's not that heavy. Anyways, getting into the thing, and now she's calmed down for her photo moment. She sees the cameras on her, so now she's going to get really stoic in this photo. looking out of the paddy wagon. In Massachusetts, they used to call them paddy wagons. It says climate activist Greta Thunberg was detained by police in London on Tuesday, a Reuters witness reported after she and others protested outside of an oil and gas conference, preventing some delegates from attending. Yeah, it didn't last long, did it, Greta? Thunberg, who became the face of young climate activists worldwide after staging weekly protests in front of the Swedish parliament in 2018, has this year been detained by police or removed from protests in Sweden, Norway, and Germany, and London now. Video footage showed Thunberg wearing a badge with the slogan, "Oily money out," standing calmly as two police officers spoke to her. One was seen holding her arm. Still images showed her being searched and placed in the back of a police van. Thunberg had been protesting outside the Intercontinental Hotel in Mayfair. There's people able to attend a hotel in London. It's not full of migrants. That's amazing. Anyways, back to the article where the Energy Intelligence Forum was hosting a gathering of oil and gas industry leaders. Now, yeah, you see the point here. She looks shocked because she's being arrested here suddenly, probably wondering why she's being arrested, because this is new for her, isn't it? And now here she is posing. Yeah, I'm Greta Thunberg. Look at me. Take my photograph. All, again, stoic in the image where she catches the camera, makes eye contact. Now, the problem is she's outgrown her usefulness. She's a celebrity activist, okay? She's used to the limelight. She's used to being invited to things. She's used to having everything paid for her. She's used to getting a fat check. Now she can't. Now she can't because she's not the disheveled child activist reaching out to the world and trying to show her dismay. You've stolen my childhood. How dare you? That's gone because she ain't cute no more. She was never cute, just for the record, but that's not cute anymore. She's outgrown it. They don't need her. But she's a celebrity activist. She's used to that. She's used to people wanting her. Now they don't. Now everywhere she shows up, they put her in jail. And she hasn't gotten the message yet. She has not gotten the message yet. I'll read a quote from her. It says, Thunberg said, "The world is drowning in fossil fuels. People all over the world are suffering and dying from the consequences of the climate crisis caused by these industries." How did you get there? Did you swim? How did you get to London, Greta? I'm just curious. Did you fly under your own power? Did you flap your arms really hard? Anyways, I'll go ahead. I'll digress. I'll go ahead and I'll catch up with some of the comments here. Nature Nerd says, politicians saying everything green while buying oil stock when wars start. Yeah. Cruising says, looks like Honey Boo Boo, brutal, and it's only Tuesday. Yep, that's right. That's me all day. Helter says, weird how the police hold her there for the cameras for a bit before taking her away, almost like it's staged. It could be. Dragon says, I think she's trying to set a world record with the most amounts of arrests in different countries. Fluke Man says, Greta's still a thing? No, she's not. Thought she was only relevant in the 2010s. Dragon says, I pray she finds a real job soon. Well, for her, this is her job. Again, she's a celebrity activist. To her, this is her job. This is all she knows how to do. But you stole her childhood. You owe her. And again, I say that I should put that on a t-shirt. No one stole your childhood, Greta. You sold it. You sold it. Urban says the event, including the arrest, was loosely scripted. She will be booked and released with minor repercussions, anything to stay relevant during the news cycle. Indeed. Preparedness says a sickly child turned into a bad penny. Monkey says, why doesn't she go to mainland China and India? They produce very bad pollutants. They're the two biggest creators of pollution in the world, industrially speaking. China and India, they're really bad. And the Philippines, a lot of those places are really bad. But it's not safe to protest there. That's why you see people like, for example, you see people in America or London protesting for gay rights in Lebanon. They don't go to Lebanon and do it. Why not? Gee, you can only guess. It's really safe to protest something in a Western country, but and there's other places in the world where you'll disappear. You will disappear. Cruising says she probably makes more doing these stunts than we do working all year. Yeah, I'm sure. And some of you might remember some time ago I had shown a picture of her and her mother sitting at, I guess, their computer desk. They were in a home office, and the office chairs that they had, I forget the name of the company, but they were upwards of 10,000 pounds a piece, pounds sterling. So that's like what, about $15,000 per chair? Can you afford two $15,000 office chairs? Just let that sink in while she wants to run around and protest. Chris Trapp says, just tuned in. Did you see Hamas supporters trying to break barricades at the White House? I heard that. Things are not going to go well for them either. He says that I've seen videos of India and there's trash everywhere. Yeah, it's absolutely disgusting. But I wanted to share that, a little bit of a lighter angle on the news as we dive in, but we may as well go ahead and knock out a couple of things about what's going on in Israel. This I thought was interesting, and this comes from the Jerusalem Post. As it pops up there, it says PA to give Hamas terrorists' families close to $3 million in pay for slay money. It says the Palestinian Authority, that's what PA stands for, will pay families of dead Hamas terrorists a combined total of around $2.8 million, according to a report by the Palestinian Media Watch, a non-governmental organization and media watchdog group. In the current pay for slay system, and that is a quoted term, that's what they're calling it, for the record here, called the Martyrs Fund. By the PA, terrorists receive monetary payments as a reward for acts of terror. The more damage an attack causes, the higher the terrorist or the terrorist family is paid. The PMW reported that a terrorist family would be rewarded NIS 6,000 or around 1,500, and an NIS 1,400 or $353 allowance monthly for life. Both come up to about NIS 7,400. The families that the terrorist married into will receive an even higher amount, the report claims. The authority will also pay $17,590 to approximately 50 new Hamas prisoners this month, the report said. The $2.8 million in question equals more than NIS 11 million. The PMW claims that the $2.8 million payments is a low estimate because there will be more martyrs and prisoners from the Hamas terrorist organization. Israeli soldiers inspect. Oh, that's something else. But where are they getting this money? Where's that funding coming from? That they're actually, I mean, come on, terrorists on a payment plan with an insurance scheme going. you can get insurance and payoffs in terrorism now. That's incredible. Usually in the old days, you just blew yourself up and you were done. Now they're collecting money. But who's funding this? Where are they getting it? I know $2.8 million is a drop in the bucket to any political organization, but where's the money coming from? Chris says, I heard Biden is only going to Israel to stop them from invading Gaza. Probably. And apparently he is actually going, what, next Wednesday? Next Wednesday, he'll land there and fumble his way through a speech and somehow make it about him. He's probably going to talk about how he visited Israel during the, or I think he claims or has claimed that he was there when the Yom Kippur war jumped off. He probably saved their lives too. The warden is here. Thanks for joining us today. Nature Nerd says none of the Muslim countries around Palestine are accepting refugees. Unbelievable. Not really. And that's actually something I'm going to talk about here in a minute. Urban says how many of them might be secretly coming up through an open border in North America? Yeah, they're already here. Fluke Man says, what a waste of life. Greta could have been anything she wanted, but she chose to fight for rich climate activists. Probably doesn't even protest themselves. Hey, she's making a lot of money at it, though. When a monkey says this Wednesday, I believe. So tomorrow, is he going tomorrow? That's kind of soon for him to jump on something. There must be a lot of money involved because he sure hasn't made it to the train wreck yet. And he hasn't been to the border either. He'll fly over it on his way. Cruising says, and the son that didn't die in the line of duty. That's right. He'll talk about his son. You know, I lost my son in Afghanistan, even though he was retired from the military 6 years when he got, cancer? Monkey says also there's still no House Speaker. Urban says the last hostage count was 199 children, babies, men, women, and elderly. And Dragon says the pay for slay program has existed for decades. Terrorists have always been rewarded for bombing, stabbing, shooting. Okay. And Chris says they won't accept refugees, so the Western countries are forced to accept most of them. That's a huge mistake for them to take them. And that's actually something that I was pulling up here really quickly. See if I can get it up. Because that's King Abdullah brought that up, right? It'll come up here. All right, there's Reuters again. Another Reuters. King Abdullah on Gaza, no refugees in Jordan, no refugees in Egypt. Berlin. And I'm probably pronouncing Reuters wrong. Jordan King Abdullah on Tuesday warned against trying to push Palestinian refugees into Egypt or Jordan, adding that the humanitarian situation must be dealt with inside Gaza and the West Bank. That is a red line because I think that is the plan by certain of the usual suspects to try and create de facto issues on the ground. No refugees in Jordan, no refugees in Egypt, King Abdullah said at a news conference following a meeting with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz in Berlin. Is that all they have to say about it? Yeah, I guess that's all they have to say about it. But they're not going to take any refugees because those people are already refugees. They're already refugees from all over the Middle East that ended up in Gaza in the first place. And these countries don't want them back because they're nothing but trouble. And that's saying a lot for the Middle East. They're the worst of the worst, and these countries don't want them back. And it will become the West's problem because the West is stupid enough to let it be their problem. To, quote, help. Oh, we're going to help. We're going to be humanitarian. We're going to show you how down we are with the whole idea of mixing cultures and all the rest of it. And we're going to save the world and be the world's hero and the world's police. It's a huge mistake. There's already way too many of them in Western countries. We don't know who they are. You've all heard about the special interest alien problem. There's almost 74,000 of them that we know of in the United States. They still allowed these people to come into the United States. It's dangerous. It's dangerous. It's frightening. It's a problem. As we get into here a little bit more, some of the comments. Helter says the peace process is truly dead. You can't make peace with people who celebrate your death in the street or reward the terrorists. No, there is no peace process with these people anyways, with this part of the world. This is a complete misunderstanding of Western politicians and Western people who think they understand or think that if you're nice to people, that's a very Christian concept, isn't it? Oh, well, if you be nice to them, if you just show them your godliness, they'll accept you and they'll change their ways. Not going to happen. It's a real bad misunderstanding of the mentality of people who grew up in this part of the world and under these circumstances. You have no idea how dangerous they are, how much they don't like you, how much they're not going to conform, how much they don't care, and how bad it can get. It can be a real nightmare. And they have all they can do is make the situation worse by trying to help them and accepting them into the country. Oh, we'll take you in. We'll give you a check. We'll give you a pat on the back. and they bring their mess with them and destroy your country from the inside out. Chris says when opinion polls 60% of Palestinians say suicide bombing is justified in the name of Islam. Nature Nerd says Ben Shapiro has a video about how Palestine Hamas indoctrinates kids in schools to hate Jews. It's disturbing propaganda. The population of Palestine is against Israel and it's war, and it is a war. Okay. Chris says, I saw back in the day Belgium accepted 300 Palestinians and majority of them became criminals and their children grew up to be criminals. Monkey says, updated Biden going to be in a summit with Jordan, Egypt, and Palestine leader in Amman, Jordan. Aha. Chris says, Islam only understands brutal violence. If that's all you've ever been grown up in, then that's all you know. It's as simple as that. Dragon says it's strategic for Egypt not to take these refugees in. It's strategic for everyone in the Middle East to refuse them. Again, they don't want these people. Chris says there are countries, videos of millions of Muslims celebrating the massacre of the Jews. Yeah, and they'll chant death to Israel and death to America. And Gary Edwards is here. Thanks for joining us today. He says he's seen the Palestinian child videos and they teach the kids to hate Jews and run them over. But that's where we're at. But it's not just Jordan and Egypt. None of these countries want these people. That's how they ended up out there in the first place. They're not going to take them. They're not going to bring them back. They wanted it to be someone else's problem and it ended up being Israel's problem. And now they're being used against Israel. And when Israel gobbles them up, then one of these other countries or all of them may move against Israel. And then what's anybody going to do? All of Israel's allies are spread pretty damn thin, worrying about the Ukraine and everything else. Now, let's say you're an American and you happen to be in the Middle East and you want to leave. You want to get out of Gaza or Israel. And one more here. It says, Nature Nerd, it says, how much is Mexico changing from all these immigrants around the world? Well, for the most part, they're just kind of funneling people through for the time being. But if America starts rejecting these immigrants again, then they'll start piling up in Mexico, and that's going to be a big problem for them. Here's from Verify. It says, yes, Americans evacuated from other countries are legally required to pay back the government. So it's not a rescue. It's not a rescue if you've got to pay for it. Major airlines have suspended flights in and out of Israel as the Israel-Hamas war rages on. As some Americans remain stranded in Israel, the U.S. State Department announced on October 12th that it would charter flights to evacuate them. Some viral posts on social media claim President Joe Biden administration is telling evacuated Americans they'll have to repay the government for their travel costs. One of the posts says these evacuated citizens are required to sign promissory notes agreeing to reimburse the government for all travel expenses. Yeah, but the U.S. government's been doing that for a long time, though. The posts suggest the repayment requirement is a new one under the Biden administration, but another post made in response claims this has actually been a U.S. policy for at least 79 years. So the question is, are Americans evacuated from other countries legally required to pay back the government? The answer, yes. Americans evacuated from other countries are legally required to pay back the government, but this is not a new policy under the Biden administration. If the federal government evacuates Americans from another country, the evacuees are required by law to repay the transportation costs. But this isn't a new requirement under President Biden administration, and it's been waived it has been waived in certain circumstances before. Federal law requires U.S. government coordinated evacuations of private U.S. citizens or third country nations to be provided on a reimbursable basis to the maximum extent practicable, a State Department spokesman told Verify. This repayment requirement for people who are evacuated during times of war, civil unrest, or natural disaster has been in place for more than 60 years when it was included under the State Department's Basic Authorities Act of 1956. So yeah, that's great. They make you pay it back. They make you pay it back. Anyways, catching up on some of the comments, Chris says Hamas is using civilians as human shields. Indeed. And he also says Israel's going to end up nuking someone if they get provoked. Urban says Hamas is an outreach of the M Brotherhood. And Chris says, meanwhile, illegal immigrants get paid thousands of dollars in housed in top hotels. I saw a video of New York City in the South. Americans are driving around scooters with their kids wearing no helmet. No helmet. They're not used to that. Nature Nerd says, how many other countries died in terror attacks in Israel if 30 Americans died? Who knows? Because we don't get those numbers. You probably have to go to each country and see if they have a news story on it and see what that toll is. I don't know if anybody has pulled that all together, but yeah, it's not unimaginable that there are people from other countries, including obviously Western countries, that had people visiting, maybe tour groups, or maybe people had family that they were visiting or something like that are citizens of other nations. But yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all, obviously, that they want you to reimburse that for travel expenses. Although, like the article pointed out, there are circumstances by which in the past that has been waived by the government, where they're like, you know what, we're not going to collect from you, which is fair depending upon the circumstances. It's kind of like how, and I don't know if they still do this or not, like when you win an Olympic gold medal overseas, you have to pay taxes on it. You have to pay taxes. I don't know. I heard that that got big in the news. When was it? During the Obama administration? And people were like, wait a minute, they have to pay taxes on winning their gold, silver, and bronze medals. Are you serious? And I don't know whether or not they've overturned that by now. It doesn't seem to me like they should be taxed for winning a medal if they're representing the country. I think that's kind of unfair. Preparedness says the terror threat is likely to escalate. It's all these people now. Urban says, isn't that what travel insurance is for? Yeah, well. And Chris says there are murdered and missing people from at least 25 countries. Wouldn't surprise me at all if it's even more than that. Even more than that. And again, all of these Western nations, all through Europe and Australia and New Zealand and the United States and Canada and wherever, they're already here. They've been pouring over our borders for years, especially in the last couple of years, and especially in the United States, since Biden just threw the gates open and wouldn't even allow for the people in the southern states to vet these people or to attempt to repatriate them or to attempt anything like that. They're just like, okay, you have to let everybody in. You have to sort it out. And they've got these guys filling out paperwork instead of doing their jobs. So they're already here. And we don't know who they are, and we're not sure where they are. And those are just the ones that we know about. Again, in 2 years, almost 74,000 special interest aliens. And now we want to act like this is a new thing. Oh, special interest aliens are being found at the border. They've been found at the border for years. We used to send them home. But we've been letting them in. Flukeman says many people don't speak up against Hamas. There's a saying, but can't remember exact words. When they came for the Jews, I said nothing. When they came for the gypsies, I said nothing. Yeah, it's a poem. It's a poem that was written during after World War II. Monkey says I wouldn't be surprised if a world war kicks off from this. Hey, they've been trying. It didn't work with the Ukraine. All they did was kept throwing money at it. This might do it because, again, like I said, you're not going to have Ukrainians in the United States blowing up a church or a subway station, but you will have people from the Middle East doing it. Urban says BBC is coming under increasing criticism for refusing to use the word terrorist. That's right. Not just the BBC, but a lot of news outlets are calling them militants or fighters. The Hamas, either Hamas militants or Hamas fighters. And it's not just the BBC that's been doing it. They've been doing it in the United States also. Some of the news outlets, they don't want to use that term, like they're scared. Keep in mind, they're not really journalists anymore. they're actors who read a teleprompter. So they fear for their lives. Flukeman says, when they came for me, there was no one left to help me. Correct. And that's the bottom line of that particular poem. The warden says the terror alert has been up since we realized that the current administration is stupid as hell. This nuts. Oh, they smart. They got in there somehow. They got in there somehow, and they're making a lot of money at our expense. So they're smart about something. Chris says, before 2020, my old neighborhood was comprised of working class people. After 2021, over 100 Islamic Muslims who speak no English moved into the neighborhood. So I sold my house to get away. Youch. Unbelievable that that's what you feel like you have to go to. But, now that they're starting to figure it out, here's something from the Telegraph. Just to let you know, the facts are now clear. Mass illegal migration is a terror threat. Well, I'm glad that the media is there to let me know this. I never would have figured it out on my own. Urban says, free the occupied BBC. Yeah, I know. And Cyberjack Sr. has joined us here today. Says, sorry I'm late. That's okay. That's okay. And one more comment, and we'll get into the argument. Preparedness says, wait till Iran starts stirring the pot. They'll get Muslims around the world to cause trouble. We've seen this in Europe all too often. Yeah, exactly. But now the Telegraph is letting you all know that it is a threat, and possibly a terroristic threat, to have mass unchecked migration in your country. You never would have figured it out if they didn't tell you in the news. Getting into the article, a sense of despair is descending upon the Western liberal democracies. It is clear many countries simply cannot cope with the interrelated problems of immigration, social cohesion, and terrorism. Last night, as thousands of football supporters traveled to Brussels for the match between Belgium and Sweden, 2 Swedish fans were shot dead. The alleged gunman, named Abdullah Lesourd, if I pronounce that correctly, posted 2 videos online in which he claimed to be a fighter for Allah and that he was a supporter of the Islamic State. Here, the script is depressingly familiar. Reports in the English and Belgian media state the gunman was Tunisian, had been in the country since 2016, and was known to the police. His asylum application had been rejected in 2020, but a request to leave Belgium had not been enacted as Lesourd had moved house. A subsequent arrest for making threats on social media was working its way through the Belgian legal system. So you had the guy twice, and his application was denied, and he's still sitting his ass in Belgium, and now 2 people are shot for it. Way to go. It would be easy to blame some of these problems on Belgium itself. Would it? Districts of Brussels have long been allowed to opt out from the rule of law, and the nation's multiple police forces are hardly a byword for competence. But the situation is little better elsewhere. On Friday, France witnessed its second murder of a school teacher by an Islamist. Here, the suspect was again known to the police as an alleged extremist and has a brother in prison for terrorism. Britain is no better. In November 2021, an asylum seeker in Liverpool died while attempting to blow up the city's women's hospital. Ahmad al-Swilmeen had originally entered Britain on a tourist visa, claiming he wanted to see Britain's Got Talent recorded in Belfast. Al-Swilmeen was still in the UK 6 years after his asylum claim was rejected. See, that's what happens when you don't repatriate people. Throw them the hell out. Huge numbers of primarily young men have crossed Europe's leaky borders since 2015. Research for Policy Exchange earlier this year found 83% of those crossing the channel on small boats in 2022 were male. 83% that they know of. We know next to nothing about who they are or what they believe. In many cases, they move to communities where levels of interrogation is already poor and extremists' ideals have currency. While the problems are bad, perhaps the greater challenge lies in enacting solutions. In debates about immigration, it was once fashionable to decry the numbers game where politicians offered, although they usually failed, to reduce the numbers of migrants entering the UK. But numbers do matter. It's quite clear the administrative system is in a succession of countries cannot cope with the numbers they are being asked to process. Yeah, let's have more debates about the subject, but let's not actually freaking do anything about it. Basically, as I catch up some of these comments real quick. Chris says they would fight every day, call black people the N-word, leave trash in the streets, and had no jobs, so they stayed home all day, every day on welfare. Talking about the Muslim people that moved into his neighborhood, for those of you who missed it. Spectre is here. Thanks for joining us today. Here we go. Catch up a few more. Gary says the global persecution of Christians globally is usually ignored by the mainstream media, even though the numbers are greater generally than any other type of religious persecution. Bingo says just got here, but I'm going back to the beginning to watch. Well, glad you could make it. Preparedness says there are many incidents every day that only make local papers. Agreed. And Urban says, keep in mind that Brussels, Belgium is home to the European Union headquarters. Ouch. That's who they ought to target. If they targeted that, then they do something about it. But there you go. It's been going on. They've been flooding in, at least since 2015, according to that article. And I know there was a big push around that time in Europe, too, with a lot of migrants coming into the country. And look at how much they've disrupted things. Look how much of a mess they've made. Look at the infestation from the uncleanliness, from the varying culture. Look at the infestation of the bed bugs. That's been coming up a lot. France is overrun with them. They're in the subways. You can't sit down in the subway. They're in London. They're in New York. It's incredible. Absolutely incredible. Well, jumping around here, there's Daisy. Daisy says, hello, have a great day. Thank you. And Bam says, will be interesting to see if the breaking of the second seal happens in 2024 in worldwide terrorist attacks in form of cultural enrichment. Oh, we're on to the seals now. The second seal. Are you sure we're not on number 6? Chris says bed bugs in London and Paris. Yeah, New York. And they only name those because those are the major international cities. But yeah, that's getting to be a problem all over. These are people that are not used to the same sanitary conditions, so they don't care. And what are you going to do? What are you going to do about it? You're going to hold them down and make them wash? Kind of like Don Johnson in A Boy and His Dog. If you saw that film, there's that one scene where he gets into the underground shelter and they're forcing him to take a bath, holding him down in the tub and scrubbing him with a brush. If anybody remembers that film. But yeah, don't act like you're surprised that this is a problem now. The facts are now clear. The facts were clear when it first started happening, and you all ignored it. Not you, but, lawmakers and government officials ignored it. Now it's getting out of control, and now they're nervous. And are they going to do what needs to be done? Are they going to do what needs to be done? Because, again, and I'll stand by it, it would be cheaper and more efficient to send them back. What they like to call repatriating, kicking them out, sending them back to whatever their country of origin is, basically. Put them on charter flights and get them the hell out of here. Well, that's what we used to do. That's what we used to do. Chris says, meanwhile, Biden and his cronies say white supremacy is the main threat to democracy. Yeah, he's the main threat. If he means himself, then yes. If he means himself, then yes. What we need is somebody who's willing to kick everybody out and send them back where the hell they came from. Speaking of which, here we go from the Jerusalem Post. Trump pledges to expel immigrants who support Hamas and ban Muslims from the U.S. He said it. Donald Trump promised on Monday that if elected president again, he will bar immigrants who support Hamas from entering the U.S. and send officers to pro-Hamas protests to arrest and deport immigrants who publicly support the Palestinian terrorist group. On a campaign stop in Iowa, Trump was responding to the Hamas killing of at least 1,300 Israelis. I think it's like 15 now, isn't it? As they continue to count, that triggered a war in which Palestinian health officials say Israel has killed more than 2,800 Palestinians in Gaza, the majority of which were armed, by the way. Trump, president from 2017 to 2021, said that if elected to a second White House term, he will ban entirely, or excuse me, entry, but I bet he means entirely, to the U.S. of anybody who does not believe in Israel's right to exist, and revoke the visas of foreign students who are anti-Semitic. He also vowed to step up travel bans from terror-plagued countries. He did not explain how he would enforce his demands, including the one requiring immigrants to support Israel's right to exist under what he called strong ideological screening. That's not that hard to figure out. If you're tied to one of these groups, you're anti-Israel. It's really that simple. Many of Trump's immigration policies were challenged in court during his presidency, and his newest pledges could also face challenges. Former U.S. President Donald Trump gestures while talking to the media during a break as he attends trial in a civil fraud case brought by State Attorney General Letitia James against him, his adult sons, the Trump Organization, and others in New York City, October 4th, 2023. A ban he imposed on immigrants from some Muslim-majority nations was struck down in lower courts, but ultimately upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court. Biden ended that ban when he took office. And now, 74,000 special interest aliens later, here we are waiting for the other shoe to drop. Thanks, Uncle Joe. Thanks, Uncle Joe. And I'll catch up a couple more comments here. Chris says Trump was ordered a gag order. Yeah, he's not allowed to talk about his court case. And yeah, so much for freedom of speech. I've been threatened with that in family court. You can't talk about this. The judge is telling you what you can and cannot talk about. Chris says 1,500 dead at least, and then goes on to say Hamas love to play the victim after the fact, that they slaughtered children, women, and elderly. Of course, because they know the West will fall for it. Gary says there are different types of jihad, economic, literary, immigration, as well as pure terrorism. Dr. Bill Warner is a good resource on YouTube for learning the history of political Islam. Okay. If anybody wants to find that. Anyways, yeah, I mean, he probably means it, like Trump or hate him. I know there's a lot of people who don't like him. A lot of people can't get around his arrogance. Personally, I don't care how arrogant he is if he does the job. And for the most part, he at least tried to do everything he said he would, which is refreshing when you consider what we've seen from politicians in our lifetime. Quite frankly, it's very refreshing to, when you had Bush in office and didn't do a damn thing, or Obama in office and didn't do a damn thing, and so on. And then at least, right or wrong, he tried to do what he said. I believe he would attempt it, and he'd get a lot more support for it right now, because politicians, regardless of how they feel about their immigration policies and pretending to be all liberal or whatever, they're scared right now. And it's their own damn fault, because they brought all of these people in. They allowed it to happen, and here you go. Where are we here? Nature Nerd says Democrats called Trump supporters Nazis for 7 years, and now these same Democrats want to wipe out Israel. Yeah. Helter says, what about deporting anti-American government officials? Well, you can only deport them if they're not actually citizens. Unless you want to do something like Escape from New York. And we can just take like the worst possible state you can think of, or city, and build a wall around it and just throw everybody you don't like in there. Snake Plissken, Escape from New York. Great film. Where are we here? All people. He says, your decision to throw your ex's extended family out when they posed as refugees from a hurricane is a perfect example of what Western government should do with its refugees. Oh, yeah, you remember that? That's an old video. That's an old video. I was fed up, though. I get the hell out of here. Bam says Ron Paul, Israel encouraged and started Hamas. Ooh, he said that in 2009. according to BAMS. Chris says, I think the chaos is only helping propel support for Trump because they want to see somebody who's going to do the job. And again, that's my biggest argument with anybody who's in politics or a lawmaker. Just do the damn job. Stop trying to be the first something to someone something. Oh, I'm the first black lesbian Buddhist in a wheelchair to do whatever or say this or that. Nobody cares. It doesn't mean anything. When you read through the annals of history, it's pointless. It accomplishes nothing. Shut up. But actually just do your job. I would love to see that, you know. Dragon says every Western nation that wants to preserve its identity, culture, laws, and history and heritage needs to start electing leaders like Trump. And those identities are gone. Those identities are gone. You know, it's bad enough that most of the identities of various countries around the world, particularly Western countries, and specifically Europe, where you have some of the oldest cultures, have been reduced to tourist traps. Now you can't even find that. You know, that's fading away as well. All people says arrogant and yes, perhaps even bullying POTUS is exactly what is needed right now in order to deal with the groups targeting our nation. Yeah, because again, these other countries, they'll respect that. It's a different thought process. Again, analogical thought process, that tribal mentality. If you're bold and they think you really mean it, they're more likely to leave you alone. They didn't like Trump for that reason. It's like, oh, we'll stay away from this guy. What other U.S. president landed in North Korea? You see what I'm saying? That took some coconuts, and they respect that. Even was it Kim Jong-un had to respect that. Oh, wow, you're going to come here? You're not scared? Okay. You know, that it means something different to them, that boldness. Booger says, any idea who got Speaker of the House yet? I think they're voting today for it. No, I'm not sure. I'm not sure who. Build a wall around LA, San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, New York City, and Philly. Well, you know, the film franchise got two of them right because it was Escape from New York and Escape from LA. And Urban says, I hope this is a wake-up call to all Democratic Jewish voters. Think before your next ballot drops. You would hope so. You would hope so, but a lot of people don't like admitting they're wrong, or they think if they keep spinning a narrative, they'll somehow benefit from it. I think most people know better, but they think they're going to gain something out of it, so they continue to go along with the lie because people are stupid. Booger says, don't forget Chicago. I got a better idea for that S-hole. Give it to Canada. You want to annex Chicago to Canada? Preparedness says party funding wants their money's worth when leaders get into power, excuse me, as I try to catch some of these up in the conversation. And, you know, just like you weren't aware that letting migrants in was dangerous. Here's something else you weren't aware of. And this comes from The Independent. It says Texas advances dangerous bill making it legal for police to arrest migrants. Oh no, that's dangerous. It's dangerous for the police to arrest illegal immigrants who are crossing the border. In recent days, the Texas State Senate moved one step closer to passing a law empowering state police to arrest migrants crossing the U.S.-Mexico border into the Lone Star State, a provision that alarmed civil rights activists. Yeah. On Thursday evening, the state Senate advanced SB 11, which would create a new state crime for illegally entering Texas from Mexico. It already kind of was, but the Biden administration took away a lot of their power, and this is basically an attempt to get some of that back. The proposal, which passed with an initial 19 to 12 votes, still needs a full floor vote before being submitted to the state house. It is carefully tailored to avoid intruding on federal immigration enforcement authority while providing law enforcement with an important new tool to deter improper or unlawful entry into Texas. The sponsor, Senator Brian Birdwell, a Republican, said of the measure during a committee meeting. Critics said the measure could overwhelm local jails and would cost the state tens of thousands of dollars a day to enforce. My concern is the state of Texas may add a lawyer on top of what we are dealing with in terms of both border security and a humanitarian crisis that has developed and continues to affect our communities. Senator Cesar Blanco, a Democrat, said of the bill. So you're worried. Let me get this straight. And here's the irony here. Here's your irony factor. The officials, the lawmakers who are against this, against basically Texas getting the power to arrest these people back, their concern is that it's going to cost the state tens of thousands of dollars. How much is it costing the state now to process these people, to feed them, to clothe them, to provide them with medical, to transport them to other communities, even busing them out of state? How much is it costing Texas now? How much is it costing the taxpayers now? And you're worried about the expense of arresting and temporarily detaining them. That's your problem. That's what you're concerned about. A couple more comments here. Flukeman says, if Trump loses the next election and Biden wins, that's obvious evidence of fraud. Can citizens legally do something about it rather than just protest? Legal, yeah. I think you can, but you won't. People aren't going to do anything. They're not going to stand up. There aren't enough people left who can or who are willing. And those who might be willing are afraid. Those who might are afraid. Gary says nothing changes for the better in America because the government is controlled by the two-party monopoly, which plays both ends against the middle. It's a kayfabe scam. And Gary says the Texas bill will fall short of passing, but it gives the false appearance that the right is trying. But yeah, this is just to elaborate on my last point here really quickly. Here's one from the Messenger. Justice Department seeking stronger prison sentences for the Proud Boy members. They ain't satisfied with the jail terms that they're already getting. The DOJ filed notice that it wants the U.S. Court of Appeals in D.C. to help impose longer sentences for Enrique Tarrio, Joseph Biggs, Zachary Real, Dominic Pizzola, and Ethan Nordine. The Justice Department on Monday filed notice it plans to appeal and seek harsher prison sentences for 5 members of the Proud Boys who are already incarcerated for their convictions tied to the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol. They're not calling it an insurrection anymore, remember? Wording is everything. Ever since the videos were leaked, it went from being an insurrection to a riot. That tells you everything you need to know. In 5 separate filings, the DOJ indicated it would seek intervention from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia to obtain longer sentences for the leaders of the far-right group. I already named them off. DOJ has initially required more prison time for all 5 of the Proud Boy members. They asked for 33-year sentences for Tarrio and Biggs, 30 years for Ryle, 27 years for Nordine, and 20 years for Pizzola. Instead, U.S. District Court Judge Timothy Kelly in September gave Tarrio 22 years and Biggs 17. Nordine, a Proud Boys charter president for Auburn, Washington, got 18 years. That covers charges including obstructing an official proceeding and seditious conspiracy. Real, the former leader of the group's Philadelphia chapter who pepper sprayed a police officer in the face, did he really do that? Is now serving 15 years. Pizzola got 10 years for smashing a U.S. Capitol window, ushering rioters into the building and taking a police officer's shield. Breaking a window, 10 years. I love it. All 5 men are currently incarcerated at FDC in Philadelphia, according to the Justice Department. So 15 to 22 years, it ain't enough. And so they want to interfere with a sentence that's already been passed to increase the time. And you think that anybody, if Biden wins again, is going to actually stand up and have a real insurrection in this country? Just saying. Just saying. Nature Nerd says 2 parties isn't the worst because countries with more parties like Canada can rule the country with less than 20% majority, whereas in the US, most presidents have had more than 40% support. And then Chris says, pretty sure one of the Proud Boy leaders was an FBI informant. Just one of them? Just one? The bigger your prepper or militia group is, the more likely it's got multiple agencies with at least one plant. FBI, CIA, BLM, ATF, IRS, anybody. All sorts of people. Helter says they're trying to make an example out of the Proud Boys to deter any would-be saboteurs. They will do anything to keep their power and control over us. Because again, you've already sat there and said, and you can look at the footage now and see, it's not an insurrection. It's not a riot. Disorderly conduct. Disrupting a session. Is the guy who pulled the door handle, the fire alarm, pretending it was the door to disrupt proceedings, is he going to get a 15-year sentence for disrupting proceedings? I'm waiting for it. All People says Justin Trudeau and Joe Biden are perfect examples of getting into office via election manipulation instead of votes. The same thing occurred in Chicago, California, Arizona, and New York. And Chris says they've stormed into Republicans' offices multiple times. And again, it's an intimidation factor. The reason this is happening is so that other groups will be afraid, because something much worse could happen in the future. Something more unrealistic. Again, if Biden does win, I mean, remember, 81 million votes, apparently, somehow, 81 million votes for sweet old Uncle Joe. If he did get in office again, I think even people who deny that there could have been something wrong with the election process, careful with my wording there, would have to admit something's really wrong with that. How did that happen? How did he get elected again? Wait a minute. Slow down. Slow your roll. But who's going to do anything? Who's going to stand up when the people who do stand up have to face things like this? Lose your entire life. Have your whole life. Their lives are done unless they get pardoned. And I think that's what they're counting on, is like, hey, whoever gets elected next won't be Biden, and I'll get pardoned and I'll get the hell out of here. I can sit in jail for a year. It's not right. Dragon says this is the Justice Department's way of saying that if someone tries to overthrow the corrupt government, they'll come after insurgents with full, unrelenting force. And overwhelming force is how most things are done by all forms of law enforcement. You don't need 14 SWAT officers to arrest a guy asleep in bed. You know what I mean? As I catch up a few, Chris says lots of dead voters. All People says the point made. Oh, he's talking about urban angst there. He previously sent money to the group that's now out to destroy them in an attempt to divide and conquer it. Talking about Netanyahu. Gary says they want you to know the election fraud is occurring because it gives the false impression that the elections are worth cheating over. And Chris says, did audio just get quieter? Did it? Do I still sound the same? Or did something happen? If something happened, you know who it is. It's ScrewTube playing games again, which happens often, unfortunately. But that's where we are. That's where we are, ladies and gentlemen, with whatever's going on in the world today, unfortunately. They are absolutely making an example out of those people. They still running people through court proceedings for January 6th. Plus, you've already been sitting in jail waiting for your hearings, aren't you? Flukeman says, imagine you spend a couple of years in prison but get, oh yeah, okay. I hope not. And Chris says, just dress up as a queer Democrat, BLM Muslim, and face no consequences. Yeah, they should have all been in drag. They should have all been in drag. They would have gotten a pass. Anyways, with that, I'll go ahead and wrap up. Again, you are watching or listening to Coffee Talk, and that is at Coffee Talk Live on YouTube for where I get the comments from, as well as Prepper University on YouTube, or fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon, as well as at Coffee Talk Chat on X, formerly known as Twitter. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you got something out of the conversation today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we will do this again tomorrow. Tomorrow.